Hello, welcome once again. Today we're going to be drawing some hands. And hands are always a problem for every artist. It's always a struggle. Before I get to that, I apologize if I look a little unshaven and unkempt. I worked a night shift on my straight job last night and I added a couple extra hours to it, so I actually worked a 14-hour shift and I've been up all night. But I did want to get some new content up this week. I work a 7-day on, 7-day off schedule. So when if anybody out there is ever looking at this and wondering how often do these videos come out, there'll be a lot more of them coming out on my week off than on my week on. So that's just a little housekeeping. So don't ever think because I've gone a week and not posted something I've lost interest. It's not true. But hands. They always pose a quandary to the artist, don't they? And one of the reasons they're problematic is because the shape changes. Look at this. Do you see that wedge? Picture a wedge. It's flat on the bottom. It's more or less flat there, although really the little finger blows it because the little finger is down. But if you can see the box, it's wider at the top, more narrow at the bottom. Basic box shape like this. You can see that box when I move my thumb back, but when I put my thumb out, what happens? The whole shape changes, doesn't it? Instead of being a wedge, what we have then is we have this whole part that comes out like this and changes the shape. And like I said, the little finger is actually a little bit down. But we'll start with the basic wedge. The wedge is our basic hand shape. That's the part that can't go away. This part has the thumb attached. So let me just show you what we're talking about, and I will run through it really quickly once. 1, 2, 3, 4 knuckles. They have to be about the same size. Now, the knuckle is actually here. Okay? See, the finger actually only divides down to there. Don't think the finger divides all the way down to the knuckle. There's where the knuckle is. See, and there's where the finger divides. Okay? And of course, it's very important to note the lengths. A lot of individual variation on this, but typically, index finger, of course, always longest. These two, more or less the same. Sometimes ring finger is a little shorter, little finger much shorter, but it starts lower. So it's really not a fair comparison. But little finger usually ends up a full joint, a full knuckle down shorter. But there's a lot of variation, individual variation, like I said. So, and then the thumb obviously has 2 joints and the part that moves, this big base part that can shift and hide. So if we have the base part out and the thumb like that, then we have a finger and I don't have room to make them go straight, so let's make them go curved. Let's say fingers are here, whoops. Okay. That's your basic hand shape. Now let's give ourselves a little more room to play with and go into some of the ways in which we can make this live. What makes it complicated is that hands do so many different things. They can clench, they can fist, they can do a lot of different things. But once you understand the basic underlying shapes, you will definitely be all right. So let's start again, a little lower. Make a wedge. Cut it off, don't make it too long. Okay, here's our wedge. First line was probably better. Okay, next we're going to start like that. Next move is the knuckles. So just visually imagine, dividing this by 4 before you start, and then 4 round knuckles. Okay? Now, we've got this part of the hand up, so let's put the thumb on there. And look at the base here. Okay, you see there's distance here? There's skin that connects, but this actual base part, it's got distance, it's below the knuckle. It's well below the knuckle. So we can represent that with an angle line. Come back down. So let's do a similar sort of hand, but we're not going to do it boring and have it sticking straight up. Okay, I'm going to do the outline and then fill in the details. If I make the fingers sticking straight up, well, let's do it boring first. anytime you're drawing a finger, start with the back side. Don't start with the underside. So let's start with the finger. We'll make it tip a little. We're not going to worry about the lengths of these because lengths can be adjusted, but we are going to, where the tips come out can be adjusted. Like that index finger is a little long, we can adjust that. So now we got the back sides of them. Once we have the back sides of them, then we can make the tips. Come along and put tips on there. Okay. And we'll make the knuckle. Show where the knuckle is. Remember, your knuckles cannot come out in a row. Your knuckles have to be here, 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 here to show the lengths. They are not in a row. They are above and below. If you try to draw a line across your knuckles, you will find out that these two are the only two that remotely line up. Okay, now that we got this much done, let's come and do the underside. I'm just going to show you first. These fingers are, I'm not going to bend this second knuckle to make it easier here. A lot of times the second knuckle, this knuckle just follows what that knuckle's doing. See, it's almost impossible to bend this knuckle without also bending that one unless you practice the move. And then if we have some fingernails, then let's make the thumb closer this time. This is your basic hand shape. Now, the next thing we're going to do when we're drawing a hand is we're going to get rid of some of this structure, take out the bottom side of that knuckle. Whichever way it's going, that's the side we're going to keep. Okay, you understand these fingers are pointing away from us, so that's why we're showing the knuckle point that way. See how it's like when you have a curve, picture a bow and arrow. Okay, here's a bow and arrow, right? The curved part, this part that's the most curved, is pointing like an arrow is pointing, okay? And these knuckles, these fingers are going up and then they're going that way. There's two directions. They're going up to the first knuckle and then they're going that way. So that means that our knuckles, because they're going in that direction, our knuckles have to curve up and then curve in that direction. Now, if we were going the opposite direction, we would be showing the opposite side. If I as the viewer am right here looking down from the other side, then I wouldn't be seeing the knuckles like that, would I? I would be seeing the knuckle, I would be seeing this side of it, and I would be seeing that side of it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Just yell out if you don't understand. I'll hear you, travel back in time, remake this tape, and explain it better. But for now, let's get this, and we'll get some of this inside structure out. And you don't want a hard line like I have here. Obviously you want it to be less than that, right? But once you have here, you can show little bits of these knuckles here. This is kind of a good technique, and there's tendons, in there. So you can show little bits of that. You don't want to show a lot of it. And if you're really getting into detail, you might, show a vein in there or something. Veins, they kind of go in between tendons. Maybe you're an old person. Sorry, old people, I'm old too. Starting to get these veins in your hands. Okay, now we're not going to work up any one of these hands because the hands can go into so many different positions. We're not going to work up any one into detail. So let's take another example and let's take a more interesting hand. I'm going to try and hold this, something like this, somewhere where I can see it. No, I'm not going to copy it. Let's just say that you have a hand, we're going to foreshorten this because it's going to kind of be coming towards you. And we're going to have a hand. I'm skipping steps here, so I'm going to not do that. Can a hand have fingers like this? Well, yeah, if the fingers are cut off, but what if the fingers aren't cut off? Well, of course they can, because fingers don't always stretch out flat. So can a hand have fingers like this? Yeah. You can have fingers that are different lengths. You know, it depends on what the hand is doing, what length the finger is. So if this finger is doing the most, if you're starting to raise this finger and the other one started to come up, this finger could actually be the longest, because we could be seeing it to here from our point of view, and only seeing that one to the knuckle. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Now, which side, are we looking at the back side of this hand or the front side of this hand? Take the knuckles right out of there. Let me ask you. Can you tell from the outline whether something is the back side or the front side? Of course not. If I'm holding the hand like this, it doesn't matter if you're standing on this side of it or standing on the other side of it. The outline is the exact same. If I had two people come up here with a pen and trace around my hand from opposite sides somehow, they would come up with the exact same outline. It's just one would be flipped over, right? So we don't know when we have an outline like this if it's the front side or the back side. That's just something good to keep in mind. And the reason I'm making a point of that is that we have to show them which side it is by what the fingers are doing. Now in this case, I'm going to make some of these fingers come at you. Okay. Let's see, in this case, let's see if this is, let's say this finger is like that. Okay, now here we have a fingernail. Now, once we get to here, we can show that that is coming at you by going, again, with the knuckle. Now we have to show that there's a knuckle in between there. This might be a little small. So we show that there's a finger in between there. And this finger is coming down into the hand. That turns that way. This finger is down there with it. So that turns that way. And this finger is all the way, down there. So if we don't have enough finger back here, we can increase it to make, and obviously the size is a little big here. The thumb might be a little small, so we're going to have to adjust all these things. Okay, now, before we move on to a different hand shape, let's talk about the inside. The inside of the hand. The inside of the hand basically has, I'm just not going to work this hand in. The inside of the hand is one ball line there. Boom. Okay. There's a different one that comes up on the other side. It tends to, lines on your hand are all individual. That's why fortune tellers can read them and pretend to know the future. They're all individual, they're all different, but this one tends to be more up. Then there's a line that usually comes between the first and the second finger, over here somewhere. And there quite often may be a second line coming down through there. You don't necessarily need to put all these lines in there, but you should just know the main ones you should know. The big three are, this is confusing. The big three are the ball here of the thumb, the sort of semi-ball, semi-wedge here of the other side, and if we looked at that from the side, it would be kind of like this, isn't it? When you look at your hand from the side? Okay. And then the mound here that comes down. And it might even come from out of here on some people. Okay. Now, and remember what I told you about the knuckle being lower than the place where the finger divides. That's important, because the knuckle is actually down here. When the finger is actually dividing up there, the knuckle is actually lower. So if we have a peace symbol and we're putting these fingers down, that's blown, but you get the idea. that doesn't show what I meant to show. We won't use a peace symbol, but let's just say we have a hand and this one finger is doing something weird. Okay. See how the fingers are dividing here, but when you put it all the way down, it goes all the way down. It goes down lower. This part of the hand looks like a solid part of the hand, but when I put that finger all the way down, notice how into it is. It looks like it's coming from lower than from the solid part of the hand, because it really is. Okay. Now before I go on any further, let's talk about fingers. Okay. Never, never, never try to make your fingers perfectly straight. Like this, okay? Never. Straight lines have no business on fingers. If you look at your fingers, you're a lot better curving the line a little in to the knuckle, then a little out. If you're doing it close up, little in, little out, little in. This is the basic shape of the back of your finger. Look at it if you don't believe me. And everybody's are different, so yours are really weird, don't worry about it. When we come down here, I want you to come down and come up into the finger and make a direction line there. Now you can lose that line. That line usually doesn't exist in real life. But it's a good practice to come up and make a directional line there. Look at a Bern Hogarth book. He likes to do that a lot. So let's come down for the next part. Come up into it, directional line. Come up, and there's where it meets the thing. Okay, now, doing the fingernail, sorry, being up all night sketching up. Okay, fingernail's basic shape is like this, and then believe it or not, like that. Okay, you should always come down like that, because you're looking at your fingernails probably and you're thinking, that doesn't look like mine, mine just look like this, right? Well, maybe they do. But when you draw them like this, you're showing, it looks better because it looks like there's a cuticle there. It's like a visual shorthand for cuticle. So when we get these, when you know how to swoop it in, bring it up into the finger and going the right direction, you know a lot, okay? So let's practice that when you're practicing your hand. If a finger is, let's say a finger is doing this, okay? Here's the front part. We're turning that way, turning it this way. See how that kind of looks like a cuticle there? Okay. Now we're going to come up into there, like that. You see what I'm doing with the curves? Coming up in there. And then we can dial that back as much as we want. If we don't want that directional line in there, we don't have to have it. But the reality is that the reason this directional line appears to be doing something correct, and of course this finger is all incorrect because they're wider at the base. Every joint of your finger, especially the last one, it's wider at the base than it is at the tip. So this would be more like that. But here is where it connects to the hand. So here is where, and the hand is here. So we could, if it's bending forward like this, then what we want to do is show that the knuckle is inside there doing something, okay? Now, let's do some various types of hands. Okay, let's say I'm pointing, one of the hardest hands to do is pointing directly at you. You ever tried to do that one? Very hard. Okay, so what this is, well, we'll start with talking about the fist. The basic fist is knuckle, knuckle. Let's go, let's do it right and go, basic fist is got 4 knuckles. Again, they're probably not straight across. They're probably more of like this, more like that than they are straight across. But, so then if you have your basic fist shape, remember your finger lengths. Okay, and you can do it out, I'm going to do an outline and then the thumb is where? The thumb is right there. Okay, and then we connect that together, and that's a sloppy but basic fist shape. I could do a lot better one, but I only bring up the fist shape because I want to show the pointed finger shape. Okay, so if we, I should have left that up there. Let's do it bigger. we have a fist shape here, and I'm going to have this finger here, and notice I'm not trying to make these straight necessarily. It's definitely, if I haven't said this often enough, it's not about straight lines when you're drawing fingers. Okay, so I have this fist shape here. Now, if this finger is, and back here is where the thumb is. And if this finger from this knuckle is pointing at you, what it's going to do is it's going to cross in some way, depending on how it's pointing. It's going to cross these other fingers. For example, it might cross like this. All right, swoop back into the finger, direction, swoop back, direction. Okay? That's a very poor example. Let's do that better. Let me look at it. Okay. So if we have a fingernail, and I'm going to do this in extreme foreshortening this time. That's not what I wanted. I did the foreshortening too extreme. So, and then our knuckles will be here, and this is going to come. These will kind of tuck under a little, and the thumb will be here. And the way I'm holding my hand, I got more thumb back there. I got a connection like this. The base of the thumb is there, and then the rest of the hand is kind of like this. And you gotta show direction on everything. Here, you put the thumbnail in. Put the thumbnail in. Put your thumbnail out. Thumbnail in. Now, which direction is this going? That way, right? Except this one could be going that way, and the one underneath it could be going the other way, because this one's sticking out a little. One underneath it could be going the other way. They don't all have to go the same way. They're fingers. They can do their own thing. Now, now we got a pretty good fist here, so supposing we're pointing a different way, okay? Supposing our point of view is a little bit different, okay? This finger could be coming right at you from, it was starting back here. It could be coming right at you from there, and it could, you know, have a thing on it, and then we got to show direction. And if it's coming right at you, this is like the most hard kind to draw, because you can't really draw the sides and show the swooping or anything. But believe me, it can cross. What I was trying to say about pointing is that it can cross the other fingers, you know, and maybe this thumb is going to change position if that's crossing the other fingers. So you might want to put the thumb more tucked. You might want to tuck it down. Let's talk about some different kinds of hands. Let's just do your basic sort of an evil villain hand. And I don't know what I want to do with these, so let's put another one there. And let's put another one there. Now, I'm not really drawing the structure now. I'm trying to show that your hand can do all sorts of interesting things. Now, once I have that outline, okay, remember directional, which direction are we going? So there's where the directional line is. Remember, this is fatter at the base of the joint than it is at the tip. So we want it more like that, right? And we're going to swoop that in. We're not going to stop at the border here. Don't stop at the border. lines crossed, don't make the mistake of stopping at the border, swoop it right in there and point it where you're going. Swoop this one in there, point it where you're going, bring it back. That one doesn't really need a pointer. Right, we're going to show that. Okay, we're going to, okay, now next finger, boom. So this is, this one is kind of pointing the other way. So that's where the joint is. Okay, now we know we know they're together. We know they're next to each other. So we know that that next knuckle's there. So when we're inventing, a lot of times when you're drawing something from imagination, a lot of times what you do is you figure out where you want the fingers to go and give yourself sort of a rough outline, and then you figure out how to connect them together so it works within the rules of what the anatomy is, or at least within a semblance of the rules, within an illusion of the rules. What is our motto? If it looks right, it is right. So always remember that. We're just about making things look right in art. These hands don't have to live. The creatures we create don't have to breathe and live. They don't have to get jobs. So if they look right, they are right. Okay? So this joint is forward, and then the next one, we go in. See the little curved line there. The next one, it's getting shitty, so I'm sorry, I swore. It's getting crappy. I've been up all night. Sorry about that. I'll totally apologize if there's any parents who let their kids watch this. I will endeavor to not do that again. But yeah, I was right. It is getting crappy, this hand. But notice that I'm not trying to use straight lines. When I came back here, I curved a little, and then I curved in the other direction. Curving hands are full of curving lines. Now this thumb, you couldn't see the joint because in reality you'd be seeing the pad of the finger there, the underside of it. And of course, you know, this bit in between here, this bit of skin right in there, that's got a lot of stretchiness in it. It always has wrinkles in it and stuff. So, you know, a lot of times just to show a little stretch line or something in there helps with a little bit of realism. Now, if you want to make a monster hand or an old person hand, I hate the juxtaposition there, but if you want to make a person look old, what you do is you overwork it, basically. If I have a hand wedge here, and I'm going to do this. Now observe, please. Back lines, top lines, back and top lines first. Please, please, please. Then go to tips. Don't worry about your lengths. Don't try and keep your lengths. Change your lengths. Make them right. Right? Okay. Now, and you notice a lot of times when I'm shorthanding here, or doing hands the short way, I guess that's shorthanding. A lot of times what I do is I just make one bend, and I don't bend this joint. You know, the smaller you draw a hand, the harder it is to bend all three joints. If I'm going to make a really small hand here, and actually bend the joints so I can show you what I'm talking about. If I'm going to make a really small hand here, see, by just keeping the lines fluid, bending them at that one joint, I can create a reasonable facsimile of a hand just with, that's too much of a bend, just with like this. That's a reasonable facsimile of a finger for a small hand, a hand that doesn't need to be detailed. But before I got off on that tangent, I was going to talk about making the hands more elderly, more gnarled, more careworn, or, you know, and if you're drawing a zombie, more zombie-like, because, let's face it, I mean, careworn, elderly, zombie, it gets to a point where we're making distinctions without a difference. But see, so let's say that this is a hand of a very old person. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to overwork it. How do you make a hand look old? Instead of showing less knuckle, like I told you, taking out most of the knuckle, we're going to show more of it. Instead of showing just a little bit of tendon, we're going to show more tendon. We're going to put veins in between there. And I don't, you know, I know a lot of anatomy, a lot of artist type anatomy, but I don't know exactly where these veins go, and for all I know they go different places on different people. But I do know this, that if you have a tendon here and a tendon there, and if you make a vein going in between, if you then take and shade it around the vein, it makes that vein pop, and it looks more like a vein. So let's get a little muddy. So we got these veins here. So we're going to kind of shade that, and like I said, to make this elderly, zombie, careworn, whatever it is, we're going to overwork it. We might even put a few like freckle marks on it. We're going to draw in all the nail, which we might want to not do. You know, if you're drawing a beautiful woman or a youth or a handsome young man, you want to minimize details. You don't want to draw multiple lines on the knuckles, because the more lines you draw on the knuckles, the more you overwork it, the more old the hand starts to look. See how this hand is already starting to look really old here. So that's basically, and then if you want to turn that into, you know, a monster hand, it's really easy. First we add some monster type fingernails to it. And then we just, you know, maybe we put a few random hairs on the back to make it look more nasty. And then we just sort of just work it to death. You know, the more you work it, the more monstery it's going to look. Glamour hands, though, you know, fashion model hands, those hands, you want them smooth and elegant. You don't, okay, doing my fashion hand here, I better do it bigger. My fashion hand, you want it smooth and elegant. So if this is, you know, pick your beautiful woman, Pam Grier's hand. Am I dating myself? Pam Grier's gorgeous. I don't care how old she is. Okay, if this is Pam Grier's hand and I want her to look glamorous, I'm going to minimize every detail. So let's just, to make it easy, let's make these fingers doing something where they're mostly hidden. Okay, and then we'll have, remember we have this base part of the thumb. If we're seeing it looks like this from the side, but it's really, you know, more like this viewed from the top. Okay, so we understand that. So if we're more on top here, and then the thumb can come up like this. Okay, now, so I want this to be a glamour hand. And of course it's already looking very non-glamorous. If I want it to be glamorous, what I'm going to do with it is simplify, simplify,